A heavy silence filled the abandoned factory, broken only by the distant groans of the undead. The rusted walls, once used for manufacturing steel, were now the last line of defense for a handful of desperate survivors. Outside, the Horde waited, their lifeless eyes locked on the building, their decayed fingers clawing at the metal doors. Inside, Ethan, the group's unofficial leader, paced back and forth, his face lined with exhaustion. He had counted the supplies twice, barely 3 days' worth of food left. Maya, a former paramedic, sat by the fire barrel, tightening the bandage on her wounded leg. Reed, a former mechanic, loaded the last few shotgun shells into his weapon, while Sophia, the youngest of them, cleaned a makeshift spear. They all knew the truth, they couldn't stay here forever. "We need a plan," Ethan finally spoke, his voice firm. "We can't wait for these things to break in. We have to move." Maya scoffed, wincing as she adjusted her injured leg. "Move where, Ethan? The city's crawling with them. We barely made it out of the last one alive." Reed tapped his shotgun against his palm. "We could try the subway tunnels. Less chance of running into a full horde down there." Sophia, who had been listening quietly, hesitated before speaking. I heard something on the radio earlier," she said. "It was faint, but I think it was a survivor. They were talking about a safe zone west of here." Everyone's eyes snapped to her. A safe zone? Hope was dangerous, it made people reckless. "You sure?" Ethan asked. Sophia nodded. "I think so. It wasn't clear, but they said something about Fort Westfield." Ethan exchanged glances with Reed and Maya. Fort Westfield was an old military outpost about 30 miles away. If it was real, it could mean salvation. If it wasn't, it could be a trap. "Even if it's real, we don't have enough supplies for the journey," Reed said. Ethan nodded. "Then we go on a supply run first. Reed and I will scout the city. Maya and Sophia, you stay here and keep watch." Maya frowned. "That's suicide. If you get cornered out there." Ethan cut her off. "If we don't try, we'll starve. We leave at dawn." As the night falls, darkness settled over the factory. Everyone tried to rest, but sleep didn't come easy. The undead were relentless, their groans echoing through the night. Maya sat near the fire, watching Sophia carefully. The young girl was barely 18, yet she had seen horrors most people couldn't imagine. "You okay?" Maya asked. Sophia shrugged. "As okay as I can be." "You really think you heard a safe zone?" Sophia hesitated. "I want to believe I did." Maya sighed. "Hope's a tricky thing. Just don't let it get you killed." Before Sophia could reply, a loud crash echoed from outside. Ethan was on his feet in an instant, gripping his rifle. That wasn't a normal groan. Reed moved toward the boarded-up window, peeking through a crack. His face paled. "We've got a problem," he whispered. The group crowded around. Outside, the horde had grown massively. What had been a few dozen zombies earlier was now a swarm. Hundreds of them, stretching down the street, drawn by some unknown force. Then they saw it. In the distance, a flare burned in the night sky, its red glow illuminating the ruins of the city. Someone had sent a signal. "Survivors?" Sophia asked. Reed shook his head grimly. "Or a trap." Ethan's grip tightened on his gun. Either way, it changed everything. Tomorrow's supply run wouldn't just be dangerous, it might be a one-way trip. The first rays of dawn barely cut through the thick haze that hung over the ruined city. A thin mist clung to the ground, weaving between rusted-out cars and crumbling buildings like a ghost of the world that once was. The undead had quieted for now, but they were always there, lurking, waiting, hungering. Ethan adjusted the straps on his backpack, double-checking his gear. Beside him, Reed tightened his grip on the shotgun, his eyes scanning the landscape beyond their factory hideout. They had chosen a route through the old district, narrow alleys, abandoned shops, and smaller streets where they could hopefully avoid the larger hordes. "Last chance to back out," Reed muttered, offering Ethan a half-smirk. "Not that I'd blame you." Ethan snorted. "We both know there's no backing out. Let's move." Behind them, Maya and Sophia stood at the factory entrance. "Be careful," Maya warned. "We will," Ethan promised. Sophia hesitated before reaching into her pocket, pulling out a rusted metal pendant. "Take this," she said, pressing it into Ethan's palm. "For luck." Ethan glanced at it, a small token with a faded emblem. Maybe an old military insignia? He gave her a small nod, pocketing it before turning away. Then, with a final deep breath, Ethan and Reed slipped into the city. The streets of the dead. The air was thick with decay. Every step they took sent echoes through the empty streets, bouncing off the skeletal remains of civilization. Cars sat abandoned, their windows shattered. Storefronts were looted, their shelves picked clean. And everywhere, signs of death, bloodstains smeared across the pavement, old corpses left to rot. They moved cautiously, ducking between wreckage and hugging the shadows. "There's a pharmacy up ahead," Reed whispered. "Could have medical supplies." Ethan hesitated. "Or it could be crawling." Reed gave him a sideways glance. "So could anywhere we go." "Fair point." They approached the storefront carefully, pressing against the wall. Through the shattered windows, Ethan could make out the interior, aisles knocked over, glass littering the floor. No movement. "Looks clear," he murmured. Reed nodded. "I'll cover you." Ethan slipped inside, his boots crunching over broken pills and discarded prescription bottles. He moved quickly, scanning the shelves for anything useful. Most of it had been taken long ago, but he managed to find a half-used bottle of antibiotics, a roll of bandages, and a soft clatter echoed from the back room. Ethan froze, his heart hammering. Something was inside. He reached for his knife, creeping toward the sound. A shadow flickered in the dim light, just beyond the doorway. Then, a figure lunged at him. Instinct took over. Ethan sidestepped, shoving the attacker against the shelf. A man, wild-eyed and gaunt, scrambled back, raising a broken piece of wood like a weapon. "Who the hell are you?" Ethan demanded. The man's breathing was ragged. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. His lips were cracked, his clothes tattered. "Please," the man rasped. "No trouble. I just needed medicine." Ethan didn't lower his weapon. "Alone?" The man nodded frantically. "I swear. I have a place, not far. We could." A deep, guttural growl cut through the moment. Ethan's stomach dropped. From behind the man, in the darkness of the back room, two hollow, dead eyes stared back at them. "Shit!" Ethan shoved the man aside just as the zombie lunged. Its rotting fingers clawed at the air where Ethan had been standing moments before. The man wasn't so lucky. The zombie's jaws clamped down on his shoulder, tearing into flesh. A scream ripped from his throat as blood sprayed across the floor. Ethan ran. He vaulted over the counter, sprinting for the exit. "Reed!" he shouted. Reed turned just in time to see Ethan burst out of the pharmacy, two more zombies shuffling after him. Without hesitation, Reed raised his shotgun and fired. The blast echoed through the street, sending the first zombie crashing backward. The second lunged, but Ethan swung his knife, burying it deep in its skull. The body slumped to the pavement. Silence followed, brief, terrifying silence. Then, from the alleyway beyond the pharmacy, the groans started rising. The gunshot had drawn them. A wave of undead began pouring into the street, their lifeless eyes locking onto fresh prey. "Move! Move!" Reed shouted. They took off down the street, weaving between wreckage, pushing their bodies to the limit. The horde followed, relentless and unyielding. Ahead, Ethan spotted an overturned bus near an old subway entrance. "There," he pointed. They scrambled onto the bus, climbing over shattered windows and rusted seats. The undead slammed against the sides, their fingers reaching through openings, jaws snapping. Ethan grabbed Reed's arm and jumped off the other side, landing hard on the pavement below. The subway entrance loomed before them, dark, foreboding. No choice, Reed panted. The Horde was closing in. With one final look at the nightmare behind them, Ethan and Reed disappeared into the darkness below. The subway tunnel swallowed them whole, the last slivers of daylight vanishing behind them. The smell of damp concrete and decay thickened the air, mixing with the distant echoes of water dripping from rusted pipes. Ethan's heart pounded as he and Reed navigated the darkness, their footsteps echoing off the cold walls. The undead above wouldn't stop searching. The Horde had grown too large, too restless. The city was theirs now, and the survivors were nothing more than prey caught in a dying world. Reed flicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the pitch-black tunnel. "We need to move fast," he whispered. "No telling what's down here." Ethan nodded. He was already thinking about the others, Maya and Sophia, waiting back at the factory. Had the gunshot drawn more zombies to them? They had to get back before nightfall. But first, they had to survive. A faint light in the darkness. The deeper they went, the more unsettling the tunnel became. Faded graffiti lined the walls, remnants of a time when the subway had been full of life. The skeletal remains of old train cars sat abandoned, their windows cracked, their seats covered in dust and grime. Then, Reed stopped abruptly. "You hear that?" he muttered. Ethan strained his ears. At first, only silence. Then, a whisper. Not the groans of the undead. Something else. Someone else. Reed aimed his flashlight forward, and the beam landed on a figure crouched near an old maintenance doorway. The man flinched as the light hit him, raising his hands defensively. "Don't shoot," he rasped. Ethan and Reed exchanged glances before approaching cautiously. The man was young, barely in his 20s, with sunken cheeks and a wild, desperate look in his eyes. He wore a torn jacket, his arms covered in dirt and dried blood. "You bit?" Ethan asked, his voice sharp. The man shook his head violently. No, I swear. I was hiding. Please, he hesitated, eyes darting between them. I heard the gunshot. I thought maybe I wasn't alone down here. Ethan studied him carefully. Something felt off. You alone? Reed asked. The man hesitated, just for a second. Yeah. Just me. A lie. Ethan caught the flicker of unease in the man's eyes. The way his fingers twitched in his side. He wasn't alone. Someone else was in these tunnels. And they were watching. Ambushed. Before Ethan could react, a shadow moved in the corner of his vision. A second man stepped from behind an old pillar, a rusted crowbar raised high. Ethan barely dodged as the metal swung toward his skull. Trap, he shouted. Reed spun, raising his shotgun, but two more figures emerged from the darkness, grabbing him from behind. A struggle broke out, fists flying, bodies colliding against the concrete. Ethan tackled the first attacker, slamming him into the wall. The man grunted in pain, but then came at him again, swinging the crowbar wildly. A gunshot boomed in the tunnel. Reed had fired. One of the attackers dropped, blood pooling beneath him. The other two hesitated. Back off. Reed growled, his shotgun aimed squarely at them. Unless you want the same. Breathing hard, Ethan pressed his knife to the first attacker's throat. Who are you? What do you want? The man snarled. We want to survive, same as you. Ethan's grip tightened. You tried to kill us. The man smirked. Because if we didn't, you would have done the same. Ethan wanted to argue, but deep down, he knew the truth. The world had changed. Out here, trust got people killed. Reed's voice was low, dangerous. Let them go? Ethan hesitated. The man beneath his knife was grinning, like he knew something. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. Then, the growls came. No time for mercy. The echoes of the gunshot had done their work. The undead were coming. Fast. Ethan barely had time to process before a wave of shadows surged from the far end of the tunnel. Shapes stumbled, arms outstretched, eyes burning with hunger. Dozens of them. No time. Reed barked. Ethan shoved the attacker away and ran. The survivors turned bandits screamed as the horde reached them first. Their betrayal had cost them their lives. Ethan and Reed sprinted through the tunnel, dodging debris, leaping over fallen bodies. The subway exit was ahead, a rusted metal ladder leading to the streets above. Go, go! Reed climbed first, shoving open the heavy grate. Ethan followed, feeling the air shift as cold, dead hands clawed at his legs. With one final pull, he launched himself onto the street. Reed yanked the grate shut just as the first zombie slammed into it from below. They had made it out. But the city was no safer. Because as they turned to head back to the factory, they weren't alone. A figure stood at the end of the street, watching them. Holding a gun. The wind howled through the ruined streets, carrying the distant groans of the undead. The city was restless, a place where no moment of peace lasted for long. But right now, Ethan and Reed weren't worried about the zombies. They were worried about the man with the gun. He stood at the far end of the street, his silhouette barely visible against the misty backdrop of destruction. His posture was relaxed, but the gun in his hand told a different story. He wasn't just watching. He was waiting. Ethan's fingers tightened around his knife, his pulse hammering in his ears. Reed shifted slightly, shotgun held low but ready. "What do you want?" he called out. The man smirked, stepping closer. His clothes were clean, too clean for someone surviving in this wasteland. A leather jacket, boots that weren't falling apart, a backpack that looked full. He wasn't some desperate survivor. He was prepared. And that made him dangerous. "I could ask you the same," the man replied smoothly. "Saw you crawl out of that hole back there. Looked like you had a rough time." "None of your business," Ethan said. The man let out a low chuckle. "Oh, but it is. See, this part of the city? It belongs to us now." Reed cursed under his breath. "Great. Raiders." The man shrugged, not denying it. "Call us whatever you like. But here's the deal, you're trespassing. And that means you owe us." Ethan's grip on his knife tightened. "We don't owe you anything." The man sighed, shaking his head like he was disappointed. Wrong answer. The ambush happened in seconds. From the alleys on either side of them, figures emerged, 5 more men, all armed. Some had guns. Others had knives and clubs. Ethan barely had time to react before the first one lunged. Fighting for survival. Ethan ducked just as a rusted pipe whistled past his head. He countered, driving his knife into the attacker's side, feeling the blade cut through fabric and flesh. The man cried out, stumbling back. Reed fired. Boom. The shotgun blast ripped through one of the raiders, sending him sprawling to the pavement. Chaos erupted. The gunfire had drawn attention, zombie attention. "Time to go!" Reed shouted. Ethan turned just as another raider tackled him, slamming him against an abandoned car. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs, and for a moment, stars burst in his vision. The raider pressed a knife to his throat, grinning. "Should have listened," he sneered. Ethan didn't hesitate. He slammed his knee up into the man's stomach, throwing him off balance. With a burst of strength, Ethan flipped him over and drove his knife into the raider's chest. The man gurgled, his eyes wide with shock, before slumping motionless. "Ethan, move!" Reed had taken down another, but the gunfire had done exactly what they feared. The undead were coming. Down the street, dozens of them poured from buildings and alleyways, drawn by the noise, their hunger overpowering everything else. Even the raiders hesitated. "Shit," one of them muttered. "Fall back," their leader yelled. But it was too late. The horde crashed into them, flesh meeting flesh, teeth tearing into exposed skin. The screams of the raiders mixed with the mindless growls of the undead. Ethan and Reed didn't wait to see the outcome. They ran. A desperate escape. They sprinted through the ruined city, dodging wreckage and leaping over fallen debris. The undead followed, relentless and tireless. Ethan's lungs burned. His legs ached. But stopping wasn't an option. Their factory. Reed pointed ahead. Their safe house. Maya and Sophia were waiting. But something was wrong. Smoke rose from the factory's roof. The entrance gate was wide open. Ethan's stomach turned to ice. They rushed inside, weapons raised. The factory was a war zone. Blood splattered the walls. The barricades were smashed. Supplies were scattered across the floor. And in the middle of it all, Maya stood with a rifle, her hands shaking. Sophia was on the ground, wounded, blood soaking her side. Maya looked up at them, her eyes filled with fear and fury. "They found us," she whispered. Ethan's heart pounded. The raiders had struck first. And now, there was no turning back. The factory reeked of blood and gunpowder. The walls were riddled with bullet holes, the floor littered with spent shell casings and broken supplies. The raiders had been here. And they had left their mark. Ethan barely had time to process the chaos before his eyes locked onto Sophia. She lay against a stack of crates, her breathing shallow, her shirt soaked in blood. Maya knelt beside her, her rifle trembling in her grip. Reed cursed under his breath. "Damn it." Ethan rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside Sophia. "What happened?" Maya's voice was hoarse. "They came in fast. We tried to hold them off, but there were too many." She looked at Sophia, guilt flickering in her eyes. "She took a hit protecting me." Sophia managed a weak smile. "Guess that makes us even," she whispered. Ethan grabbed a cloth from his pack, pressing it against Sophia's wound. "We need to stop the bleeding." "Already tried," Maya muttered. "She needs more than just a bandage." Reed glanced around the factory, his jaw clenched. "Did they take anything?" Maya nodded. "Almost everything. Food, water, ammo. They left us with scraps." Her voice hardened. "And they said they'd be back." Ethan's stomach twisted. They weren't safe here anymore. The factory had been their refuge, their stronghold against the undead. But now, it was compromised. And the raiders would return to finish the job. A hard decision. "We have to leave," Reed said, breaking the silence. Maya hesitated. "And go where?" Ethan looked out through the shattered windows. The city stretched before them, ruined and crawling with the dead. The factory had been the only place they could fortify. The idea of starting over somewhere else felt impossible. But they had no choice. "We move now, before they come back," Ethan said. "Find another shelter. Something defensible." Reed nodded. "We need to get Sophia somewhere safe. She won't last long without proper care." Maya sighed, running a hand through her tangled hair. "Fine. But we're not running forever. Sooner or later, we have to fight back." Ethan met her gaze. He knew she was right. But right now, survival came first. They gathered what little supplies they had left, loading up their bags. Weapons, bandages, whatever food the raiders hadn't taken. Then, as they prepared to leave, a noise. A car engine. Ethan's blood ran cold. "They're back." An unexpected visitor. The sound grew louder, approaching fast. But something was off. Raiders didn't usually drive straight in. They stalked. They ambushed. Ethan motioned for the others to stay low, creeping toward the shattered doorway. He peeked outside. And what he saw made his breath catch. A truck barreled down the street, its tires screeching as it swerved between wrecked cars. A figure clung to the side, firing a rifle at something behind them. Then, another sound. A deep, guttural roar. Ethan's pulse spiked. This wasn't just a random survivor. Something was chasing them. And it was big. A monstrous pursuit. The truck skidded to a stop just outside the factory gates. The driver, a woman in a torn jacket, jumped out, her face wild with panic. "Inside! Now!" she yelled. Ethan barely had time to react before he heard it, the thunderous pounding of massive footsteps. Then it emerged. From the ruins of a collapsed building, a hulking, mutated zombie burst into view. Its skin was thick and discolored, its muscles unnaturally swollen. Half its face was gone, replaced by pulsing, exposed muscle and jagged teeth. And unlike the slow-moving hordes, this thing was fast. Too fast. "Move!" Reed shouted. The survivors dived for cover as the monster charged. It slammed into the truck, flipping it onto its side like a toy. The driver barely scrambled away in time, rolling onto the pavement. Ethan fired. The bullet struck the creature's shoulder, but it barely flinched. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Maya muttered. The creature turned toward them, empty eyes locking onto its next prey. Then it roared, the sound shaking the very ground beneath them. And it charged. The mutant charged like a battering ram, its massive form shaking the ground with every step. Bullets wouldn't stop it. Running wasn't an option. They had to fight. Ethan barely had time to react before it slammed into the factory gates, ripping them from their hinges. The impact sent a shockwave through the building, knocking over crates and shattering glass. "Scatter!" Reed shouted. The survivors dove in different directions as the monster swung a massive, rotting arm, smashing through a stack of metal barrels. Ethan ducked behind a workbench, his heart pounding. He had fought plenty of zombies before. But this thing? It wasn't just another undead. It was a weapon. Maya popped up from behind cover, firing a shotgun blast at its head. The slug struck its skull, but instead of going down, the creature barely staggered before turning toward her with an enraged snarl. "Shit," Maya muttered. It lunged. Ethan moved on instinct. He grabbed a metal rod from the ground and swung it with everything he had. The rod cracked across the creature's knee, sending it stumbling. That was all the opening Reed needed. Boom! A shotgun blast tore into the monster's exposed muscle. This time, it roared in genuine pain. It could be hurt. But it wasn't dead yet. A desperate plan. "We need to bring it down," Ethan shouted. "Yeah? You got a plan for that?" Maya snapped, reloading. Sophia, still weak from her wound, crawled to cover near them. "The crane," she gasped, pointing to the overhead factory crane. Ethan's eyes flicked up. The industrial crane. Heavy duty, built to lift thousands of pounds. The hook dangled just above the mutant's head. "That could work," he muttered. Reed caught on immediately. "We bait it under the crane, drop the hook, and crush it." "Or it crushes us first," Maya said. "Either way, we don't have time to argue." Ethan ran toward the control panel. The mutant turned, tracking him. "Hey, ugly!" Maya yelled, firing another shot to keep its attention. "You want a piece of me?" The monster roared and charged toward her instead. Maya cursed. "That's not what I meant." She ran, dodging debris as the creature swung wildly, missing her by inches. Ethan reached the control panel, hands shaking as he flipped switches. The crane groaned to life. The hook swung overhead, moving into position. "Lead it under," Ethan shouted. Maya sprinted toward the center of the factory, the mutant right behind her. "Now!" Ethan hit the release switch. The crane hook came crashing down. The fall of the beast. The metal hook slammed into the monster's back with a sickening crunch, pinning it to the ground. It let out a deafening, rage-filled howl, its limbs thrashing. Reed didn't hesitate. He raised his shotgun and fired directly into its head. Boom! The first shot blew off half its jaw. Boom! The second ripped through its skull. The monster shuddered, then went still. Silence. The only sound was the survivor's heavy breathing. Then Maya collapsed onto the floor. "Holy shit! It's dead," Reed muttered, nudging it with his foot. It's actually dead. Ethan exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. Let's not wait for another one to show up. Sophia, still weak but smiling, looked up. Not bad, guys. The woman from the truck, who had been knocked aside during the fight, finally stood up, brushing dust off her torn jacket. You just saved my ass, she said. And I think you'll want to hear what I know. Ethan narrowed his eyes. And who exactly are you? She smirked. Name's Riley. And if you thought that thing was bad, you haven't seen what's coming next. Ethan exchanged a glance with the others. They weren't out of this yet. Riley wiped blood from her forehead, still catching her breath. You think that thing was bad, she said, nodding toward the monstrous corpse. That was nothing compared to what's out there. Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle. Start talking. The others gathered around, exhaustion weighing on them, but Riley's words sent a fresh surge of tension through the air. You've heard the rumors, right? She asked. That the undead are changing? We've seen it firsthand, Maya said, nudging the monster's body with her boot. These things are evolving. Riley nodded. Yeah. And it's not random. There's something controlling them. A cold silence settled over the group. Sophia, still weak but listening intently, furrowed her brow. Controlling them? You mean like a leader? Riley hesitated. More like a hive mind. Some of them, the ones that are bigger, smarter, they can direct the hordes. That's why you keep seeing them move in massive waves. Ethan's stomach tightened. He had noticed it too. The way zombies attacked in coordinated surges, as if something was guiding them. But how do you know this? Reed asked, his eyes narrowed. Riley took a deep breath. Because I was part of a research team studying it. Before everything fell apart, we found something horrifying. There's a nest. Maya's expression darkened. A nest? What the hell does that mean? Riley looked at each of them, her face grim. It means if we don't do something soon, the Horde is going to overrun everything. The mission to the nest. Ethan felt the weight of her words sink in. He had spent months surviving, moving from shelter to shelter, just trying to stay alive. But now, he realized that hiding wasn't enough. If there's a nest, he said, then we have to destroy it. Reed scoffed. That's insane. We barely took down that thing, and you want to take on a whole nest? Sophia, still leaning against the wall, spoke up. If what Riley says is true, it doesn't matter where we run. The Horde will find us eventually. Maya sighed, rubbing her temples. So what? We just march in there and start shooting? Riley shook her head. There's another way. My team was working on a bioweapon, a way to disrupt the Infected's connection to the hive mind. It's unfinished, but if we can get to the lab, we might be able to use it. Ethan nodded. Then we need to find that lab. Riley hesitated. There's just one problem. The lab is inside the city. Silence. Ethan exhaled. Of course it is. The city was a death trap, overrun with zombies and possibly worse. But if the lab held their only hope of stopping the Horde, they had no choice. A dangerous journey begins. They packed what little supplies they had left. Ammunition was low, food was almost gone, and Sophia was still injured. But there was no time to wait. Riley led them toward the outskirts of the city, where collapsed highways and abandoned vehicles blocked the roads. The air was thick with the stench of death. The closer they got, the worse it became. Zombies crowded the streets, moving in eerie synchronization. Unlike the mindless stragglers they had encountered before, these undead were focused. Organized. It was as if something was calling them toward the city's center. Ethan's grip on his rifle tightened. We need a way in without getting torn apart. Riley pointed to an old sewer entrance, half hidden by rubble. That'll take us close to the lab. But once we're inside, there's no turning back. Maya sighed. Great. First a mutant, now a sewer full of zombies. Reed smirked. Could be worse. Maya shot him a look. Oh yeah? How? A horrifying screech echoed from the city. The ground trembled beneath them. Ethan's stomach dropped. Riley's face paled. Because something big just woke up. The earth trembled beneath their feet as the monstrous screech echoed through the ruined city. Something massive was coming. Ethan gritted his teeth. We need to move. Now. The group sprinted toward the sewer entrance. Behind them, the Horde stirred. The undead, once roaming aimlessly, suddenly shifted, their movements unnaturally synchronized, as if they had received a command. Reed yanked open the rusted sewer grate. Go! I'll cover you. Maya jumped in first, followed by Sophia and Riley. Ethan hesitated, scanning the streets. The Horde was coming fast. Then he saw it. Emerging from the shattered remains of a skyscraper was a colossal figure, far larger than the mutant they had faced before. Its flesh was blackened and pulsating, its eyes glowing with eerie intelligence. It wasn't just another zombie. It was the hive's core. Reed fired a shotgun blast before diving into the sewer. Ethan followed, landing with a splash. The moment they were inside, they yanked the grate shut just as the street above was swarmed with undead. That was too close, Maya panted. Sophia groaned, clutching her wounded side. Tell me again how this was a good idea? Ethan turned to Riley. That thing out there, it's part of the hive, isn't it? Riley nodded grimly. The Alpha. If we don't destroy it, the Horde will never stop. Ethan clenched his fists. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. They had to end this. Inside the lab. Navigating the sewers was a nightmare. The air was thick with decay, and every sound echoed in the darkness. Finally, they reached the underground facility. The lab was in ruins, flickering emergency lights, shattered glass, and blood-streaked walls told the story of what had happened here. Riley rushed to a control panel, typing frantically. If the bioweapon is still intact, we can use it. Maya stood guard by the door. And if it's not? Then we're screwed. Ethan scanned the room. Time was running out. The Alpha was out there, controlling the Horde. If they didn't stop it now, there would be no more safe places left. Riley suddenly gasped. It's here! The bioweapon, a small device filled with an experimental compound, was still operational. Ethan grabbed it. How do we use it? You have to get close, Riley said. Too close. It needs to be released near the Alpha's core. Reed shook his head. That's suicide. Ethan exhaled. Then we better make it count. The final battle. The team resurfaced into the ruined city, stepping into the chaos. The Horde was everywhere. And standing at the center of it all, was the Alpha. The monstrous creature turned its glowing, dead eyes toward them, as if sensing their intent. The ground shook as it began to move. Ethan looked at his team. We hold the line. No matter what. Maya smirked. Wouldn't have it any other way. Reed pumped his shotgun. Let's send these bastards back to hell. The Horde charged. Gunfire erupted as the survivors fought back with everything they had. Bullets tore through undead flesh, grenades shattered the pavement, but the Alpha kept coming. Ethan sprinted forward, dodging grasping hands and swinging claws. He could feel the weight of the bioweapon in his hand. This was it. The Alpha let out a bone-rattling roar, raising its massive arm. Ethan leaped. With a final burst of strength, he slammed the device into the Alpha's exposed chest and hit the trigger. A high-pitched whine filled the air as the compound was released. The Alpha froze. Its body convulsed violently, its veins turning black as the bioweapon took effect. Then, with a final, guttural scream, it collapsed. The moment it hit the ground, the Horde stopped. The zombies twitched, then fell lifeless where they stood. Silence. The war was over. A new dawn. The city was still. The undead were no longer moving. The hive mind had been broken. Ethan fell to his knees, exhausted. Maya, Reed, Riley, and Sophia stood beside him, all breathing heavily. "We did it," Sophia whispered. Riley looked around, her eyes filled with disbelief. "It's over." Ethan slowly stood up, looking at the ruins around them. Humanity had won today. But the world was still broken. Reed sighed. "So, what now?" Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle. "We rebuild. We find other survivors. We start again." Maya smirked. "Sounds like a plan." As the sun rose over the shattered city, the last survivors of the war against the Horde walked forward, ready to face whatever came next. The end.